as the new.
All right. I'd like to call to order the policy committee meeting, noting that 3 board members are present. Joan substituting for Judy, as well as Dr. Brown, Allie, Steve, and Amy here. With that, I'd like an approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I did not receive any public comments, so we're still potentially waiting for Brian to show up, but with that, we'll turn right over to the first agenda item, policy resource guide update. Amy Johnson's going to give an update on reading and literacy policy.
Thank you. So this is a policy that they recommended we add after the Act 20 legislation. And so they provided us with 2 sample policies. They have similar headers, but policy sample 1 is a little bit more succinct, and policy sample 2 has a little bit more detail. Quite a bit of the policy is actually in the legislation. So some of the information in policy sample 2, we didn't really feel was necessary because it's already in the statute. So we felt like policy 1 gave us everything that we needed and was a little easier to follow. So we would endorse policy sample 1, but I would be happy to answer any questions.
I see it took out of the big chunk of evaluation. Just any comments on that?
Yeah, we already have another policy that talks about curriculum evaluation, and so we didn't feel like we needed a specific one since we have a policy for all of our curriculum evaluation.
Any comments, concerns, questions? Okay.
Motion to move forward to the board. Second.
That's sample policy 1. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With that, I think Brian's still not here, and would either of you, Steve or Allie, be able to take the next one?
We just added.
What's that?
I mean, do you want to look at this one or do you want to skip? down?
Oh, we could, I guess, change the agenda. We'll just push that off. No reason to. Yep, let's jump right into the regular policies. 700 series.
Rebecca, do you want to pull up that spreadsheet or? Okay. So on the transportation one, this was one that we asked to have another month on at the last meeting. So if you recall, WCSD took our policy and integrated it into their recommendation for a sample policy. Allie and I wanted to make sure that we had the time to go through the 2 of them and kind of go through line by line, which we did. So Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind then pulling that up. And I just want to point out one pretty big item that came forward as a discussion at last month's regular board meeting that would be different than what's been in here before. So the first thing Allie and I did was we made sure this was consistent with the existing board policy. And the second thing we did is we added the new section that we believe captured the discussion that was taking place last month. Rebecca, would you mind making it a little bit bigger?
Can you walk me
Okay, so if you see the second paragraph that's highlighted in yellow, at the very end of it, we wrote new language based on discussion from September board meeting. So we took just a draft of this to try to see if we were capturing it. So what we wrote in here is the district administrator may approve the transportation of students within the mileage limits above. So an example of that was the Heritage family that reached out to the board. They're 0.92, I think off the top of my head, away from the school. So they would be within the mileage limits above, which for elementaries are a mile. The approval shall only be granted upon parent guardian request for an extenuating circumstance, which may include factors such as, we put in financial hardship, medical hardship, language barriers, etc. Documentation of the extenuating circumstance must be provided to the district administrator. Students will be required to walk to the nearest existing bus stop location. So a couple of things in there that are really important. The first one is the last sentence. So this may or may not be what parents were asking for, but what we're saying here is we're not creating new bus routes. We're not driving into areas that aren't eligible, which probably would open up a whole bunch of other questions for people. We're saying if you're, as an example, 0.92 miles away from Heritage, and you have, let's say, a medical hardship in the family, and it's difficult to get your kids to school, you could have them walk, in this case, to the north, past the mile away from the school, and go to an existing bus stop where the bus is already going. Not that the bus would deviate and then drive inside the mile to pick up the family. So I think that's an important point. If that's not what the board was intending, we would need to change that. The second one, Dr. Brown brought up that there should be some type of documentation of extenuating circumstance. Otherwise, it's very likely there would be numerous requests, and that there's probably has to be something that would designate a situation saying, hey, we have this going on, etc. Probably the most common one that I would see happening is medical. We do have medical situations for students where our team knows that the 504 process is very paper intensive, and it might be a student who's injured for just 6 weeks. And so we, instead of going through the whole 504 process, we try to pick them up on a bus. It could be medical for the parents, but we also identified financial language barriers. I do have a request right now for a language barrier. A family that does not speak English is requesting their intermediate school student be able to get on the bus. So these do happen, but I think the key behind it is documentation will be required, and the bus routes themselves would not be changed. So I guess from the board members, I'm curious if this kind of aligns with what you're thinking, or would there be something you would want us to change on this? Because again, this was just our first attempt at trying to kind of capture that discussion.
Is this something that would be evaluated every year? So if we made this request this year, then next year, it's a new year, so now we're gonna make this request again? Or is it something that once it's approved, it's forever approved, or?
That's a good point. We probably should add in here that it would be an annual
I would think that would be-
approval. That would make sense, yeah.
Why would you need the annual approval? I mean, you're looking at each individual circumstance that might be, which they're gonna bring up to the administrator anyway, right? It's not, is that what you're,
Well, if they approve it this year and now.
this policy as is, yep.
No, that
For a
language
kid.
about evaluating special circumstances, extenuating circumstances to pick them up out, to bust them outside of
Right.
that particular language. Then the following year, their circumstance might change and they might not need that special
Yeah.
circumstance.
Is a year, I mean, it's almost like if the circumstance changes within the year, it should be reevaluated. It's not like a deadline timeline, right? It's if, right, an event happens or something changes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I agree.
But I agree with Katie. I think it should be reviewed annually, so if we're allowing them to bus 1 year, things could change, or, you know, I do think that it should be on an annual, each year they have to come back and ask again. The family has to ask again,
Right.
instead of just letting, you know, otherwise the family would get bused.
I mean, I agree. It seems like more of an on-demand type of, like things change throughout.
But
Yes,
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean,
if
what if it said,
families-
like, approval shall be required at least annually?
yeah,
Yeah.
Which would then
At
indicate
least.
that, like, we're not approving,
yes,
Dr. Brown's not approving of kindergartner for all of the elementary schools,
Right.
right? So that it'd be clear to a parent that at least once a year,
You look at it.
it needs to
Yeah.
be,
I think
and it could be
that's-
less than that. Like if someone puts in for a medical, you know, a 8-week situation for a broken leg or something like that, that it's not gonna be for a whole year.
Right, I like that language,
Yeah.
at least, and
and to think of like the worst possible case that happens. Let's say it goes down, well, no matter what the distance is, the student traveling from their location to that site, something happens during that time, you know, the response, you know what I mean, like something horrible would happen, a liability sort of thing of that. I'm just that we wouldn't be,
Sure.
Yeah.
What
I'm
we could,
thinking
yeah.
crazy.
I see what you're saying. I think in the end, Ally and I would need to create a process for parents to request this. Maybe it's a form. And I think in there, we could indicate to the family that this is a decision the family would be making. They would
Right.
be responsible for getting their students to the nearest
correct.
pickup location. And that's a family decision, whether the
Correct.
kids walk or bike or the parent walks with them. Just to make sure that the responsibilities are clearly outlined, that it's not the district responsibility to get the students from the home to the bus stop. That's the parent's responsibility. And I think we could identify that, because I think ultimately you would want something that someone's filling out that's consistent
Correct.
to
And
get to
generally-
you.
Right, and generally speaking, it's the parent's responsibility. Just generally
Yeah.
speaking, every morning I have to get my child to school, to the bus stop or or watch them walk the pathway or however. This should fall in line
Yeah.
with that as well.
Sounds good.
I like the language, Steve, that you came up with. I think it serves what I felt would be more people-friendly to some of those cases.
So we'll add in the statement about approval timeline. We'll just add that in before the board meeting. The rest of it, of this whole policy, was Ally and I going through and just making sure that all, like the paragraph above exactly matches what's in the current board policy. So that was the rest of what we were doing in here. It was just that paragraph that we put in with the statement at the end that would be new. So other than that, it's now consistent with what we had before in the new format, basically.
So Steve, in the event that it goes through Monday night with the full board, would you reach out to any of those families that have requested and make them aware of this change?
So I have 3 families right now that are waiting to see
Okay.
if this gets approved at the next board meeting. My intent would be to reach out to those 3 rather than make a
Right.
4,000
I
student
didn't know
message.
if you
Yeah,
kind of had.
I do. Yeah, there's
Thank
3
you.
families that I'm tracking that are waiting for the decision one way or another.
Okay,
Is that pretty normal, like having a handful of families each year kind of
Yeah,
ask for?
yeah. I would expect there will be less than 10 total requests across the district throughout the year. It's not an overwhelming thing by any stretch. But this certainly does provide Dr. Brown with flexibility to take a look at a situation one way or another and weigh in on it. And it is more parent friendly, and there are situations that are just extenuating.
Yes,
So,
thank you. Steve, or Ted,
Yeah, I was
thank
just
you.
thinking, so we're just gonna hold it then, do them all at the end, or do you wanna do that individually? I'm good with holding it, so we can go on to the next one.
I'm just gonna have Ellie talk through, unless you want to jump back to the one
Would
with
you want
Brian.
it to Brian?
before we-
You want to keep-
We could, Brian, if you'd like to, we set you aside a little bit if you wanna come back to address yours, or.
Oh, just one.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I don't know if there's any questions in there. It's just adding the state, it allows for if someone is a regular employee or school board member that they can be treated and have the same responsibilities as a regular coach.
Motion to approve. And we bring it to the full
Yeah.
board.
Second.
Just. Okay, all in favor?
Oh,
Aye.
because we're-
It's okay,
sorry.
we're all good. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, so 760 was food service management. They recommended we replace it with the PRG policy, and the only edits we made were selecting which position should be accountable for which areas. The next one was the rule of that one, and that was we just had to put in the 504 coordinator. So put the director of special education in there. The free and reduced price food services, we just put the correct titles in there because it said business manager from the previous policy, but we did keep ours. Vending machines, we just updated to be Fund 21 instead of agency funds.
Can I ask a question about that? So
Yeah.
Fund 21 is the building, the general building fund. Is that correct?
It can be, it's like the fundraising and donation fund, so anything that is made from this can't generally go into Fund 10, so it goes into
Right.
Fund 21 because there's less discretion to what. can be done with that.
So are there vending machines at the middle school?
Yes.
So that would go into the middle school
Yeah.
fund and the
Yeah.
high school would go into the high school fund.
Yeah.
So the principals are kind of then overseeing the use of those funds.
Yeah.
So who actually kind of manages the vending machines?
So as an example, there's ones at the high school that the student council
Oh, okay.
kind of owns the management of, and then they get the profits from it.
I wondered if
Yeah.
a student group did it,
Yes,
if that
they
would be
do.
there.
Yeah,
Good,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
yeah. So pretty much the principals turn that over to student groups, and then they, in their group, assigns like who's gonna be responsible
But
for.
then they get the
Yes,
funding.
then
and
they get-
to
yep,
utilize
yep.
that as the property.
I've never really, I don't think I've gotten anything out of the vending machine. Are they really as healthy as our policy says? I mean, you can't have soda, drinks, and there's no
No.
junk food. So it's.
I don't think there's any candy in it.
No. I haven't looked at it recently, but there hasn't been,
No, I
so,
think that they are.
I mean, our policy says there can't be, so.
yeah.
And there's a vending machine in like the staff lounge. Does that go to the building fund or? And it's okay.
I don't know off the top of my head
That's
who
fine.
manages that one.
I just was thinking
Yeah,
of all
not
those
sure.
vending.
Yeah,
And then when the different clubs come in and sell concessions, their rules are
Yeah.
not under this.
Right,
Right.
Because
correct.
they do sell candy and,
Yeah, so
Junk.
we have a different policy in the 300 area on like student wellness and concessions for like a Friday night football game or a basketball game are excluded
okay.
from that
Okay,
policy.
that's where that's.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
All right. Thank you.
And then the insurance management policy, we just changed in the last sentence through quotations or bids as needed instead of every 3 years. And then there was 2 that they recommended we delete. So we agree with that. The first one was 763 district wellness, because I think there was a wellness policy in a previous series that captured everything it needed to. And then telephone services, we also said to delete that one because there's no public phones anymore.
Sense.
And the one, just to add about the one that says district wellness, that was a specific requirement of the National School Lunch Program, which we currently are not in. If at some point we rejoin the National School Lunch Program, we would need to put that one back in. But we are keeping like the free and reduced one because we offer our own program here. So even though that's not a requirement being outside of the National School Lunch Program, we adopt the same standards that any other district that has a free and reduced program uses. So we kept that just because we've run a local program, but this one, the one that's at the bottom of the screen, is a specific requirement of the National School Lunch Program. And as Ally mentioned, if you look in the 300s, we have a different policy in there related to wellness, which covers what you just brought up. So this one was just a specific requirement that no longer exists unless we decide to jump back into that program.
Very good. Any questions? I'll take now a motion for all of these policies
Motion to move forward with all these policies.
as recommended, I guess.
Yes. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have something set, I don't know, future meetings?
We can, I have to see where Barry is. I don't have any policies. Steve, did you want to talk about something?
Yeah, there's just a couple things I wanted to mention. Just one thing to just be thinking about. So at the brand new Heritage, there are EV charging stations behind the school, and they're also in front of the school. They're marked off with a green, if you look at it, it's just got it, well, we have them out here too. The difference between out here and at Heritage is at Heritage, they're totally ready to go, but we've not turned them on. So we've not turned them on because we feel we need a policy on that. And so there's a couple of different routes we can go, but we were hoping at the next meeting, we could start that discussion. The decision that would have to be made, there's a couple of different angles to it. One is staff or visitors who would pull up during the day and park in those two stalls. And then there's whether or not we want to be on the public grid. So we're going to want to chat about that, like whether we would want, like on a Saturday at 4 o'clock, you know, if you're on the public grid and you're driving a Tesla through town and you're running out of charge, you're looking at spots on your system and it either pops up Heritage Elementary as a choice or it doesn't. If it does, I'm just drawing the conclusion or the assumption that you would probably want us to have a public charge, a rate. Many places do have a public rate to use it. You can actually also build in a slight margin. So if you wanted to profit from it, and a lot of places do. So like the vendor that we're working with has asked that question, do you want to offer it to the public? And if you do you want to offer it at cost? Do you want to offer a little margin to it? And then the same thing exists with staff. Do you want to have it for free? Do you want to do it at cost? Do you want to charge a little bit extra? But those would be the kind of questions you'd have to answer. And, you know, with the public access, the system does have the ability to like turn it off at like 10 p.m. if you wanted. But the question is, as board members, how do you feel about like someone driving through town, pulling it up on their computer, on their screen and saying, oh, I can go there, and charge it on a weekend? And do you think the public would have concerns if they're walking by? And what's that person doing there? It would be a complete stranger, right? It could just be anybody driving through town, sees that. So I guess as board members, you'd have to think a little bit about, does that concern you? Would community members have concerns? People we don't know at all, just pulling up on a school site on a weekend and just kind of hanging out there while their vehicle charges. So those are kind of the questions to be pondering. Ultimately, we would like to be able to at least utilize them for staff, visitors, parents, etc., and then discuss the topic of the charge, how we would charge for that. But then secondarily, would want to know your thoughts on whether or not you want these showing up on like the public system or not. And then out here, if you can remember, we put the infrastructure in, but didn't put the actual charging stations in. So it's a little different discussion out here. They're not ready to go, but they are at the school.
How would we regulate, so if we made it on the public infrastructure, how would we regulate if somebody who wasn't a staff member, or parent, or volunteer, somebody coming, that they wouldn't just come during the school day and come and charge their vehicle? Is
Yeah,
that something you can't?
Is there capabilities? If you have like a code to, like a staff code or something like that, I'm sure there's some kind of capability in the app because it's all through an app.
I feel like there is an ability to like designate hours where it would be available, like let's just say 4 to 10 or something like that for the public. We could look into that. The technology's pretty, it's impressive, but it's really a question as board members, like, do you want community members who live across the street reaching out all the time and saying, someone just pulled up to the school, at a Sunday at 1, like, what are they doing there? Or someone calling the police, why is there someone sitting at the school at 9 o'clock at an elementary school at 9 o'clock at night on a Saturday night, right? That just seems odd. But I just want to have that discussion about what your thoughts are related to that, whether you want to just keep it like during the day for like staff only as a starter, or whether you want to just open it up, or like, we could get John at the next meeting where he can talk about the capabilities of the technology, but we just want to make sure we're having a board approved policy before we start using these things.
Do other public schools have
Yes.
charging stations in Dane
Yep.
County?
Yep.
Okay.
So we could look to Rebecca started a conversation with the WCSD about looking for samples and seeing what's out there.
And this might be a conversation for like the facility committee too, because it is facility.
Yeah.
And
when you.
even budget.
And
because it's
then
money.
budget, do you feel that there could be 2 different rates, like
Yep, there could be.
employee rate
Yep.
and a general?
Yep. Yeah, there is the potential to build in a margin and actually come out ahead. But again, the question is whether or not you want to get into that, as a system, or whether you feel there would just be too many community concerns about why is there someone at Heritage at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night? Or do we explain that to people, why there is someone there,
You're gonna get a question initially, but if it becomes kind of routine behavior, that's a possibility. There aren't that many charging stations yet out on the grid,
right?
and it's problematic when you have an electric car
Yep.
to make a long trip and not have those stations, so.
Well,
might be
thanks
a
for
way.
bringing it up. It
Yeah.
totally makes sense that we have some sort of
Yeah,
policy on
let's,
it, so
Look into
bigger
it.
discussion.
And then the other one we held off on today as Rebecca mentioned, there was another one that Barry Forbes has worked through. It's the records retention policy. We just asked to hold on that one because we need to get a larger group of people together on it. But our intentions are to bring that one back to the next committee meeting. So we want to get the EV charging station going, the records retention going, and then anything else that Barry gets ready.
The 800s.
The 800s, yep.
For the, back to the charging stations, for the ones out here, do we have the equipment though? I know they're not out there, but have we ordered the equipment? and
We have
everything?
not ordered the equipment, but the most expensive part we already did, which was all of the infrastructure, and they're stubbed up and they're ready to go. We just were bumping right up against the budget figure for this building. And so we only were able to put the infrastructure in. So that would be a secondary discussion at some point, as the facility committee is going to be looking at the finances of Heritage wrapping up, and actually Ally and I have a meeting to go over the reconciliation for Heritage. We're also presenting the reconciliation, the contingency for the high school in Bethel. So that would ultimately be a question for the facility committee is, do you want to consider that final part out here as well? And then the same questions about whether you want it, on the public grid or just staff only, and et cetera. So.
Thanks, Dave. I'll take the motion to adjourn. All in favor?
I
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.